It's time to practice some magic. Welcome in, everybody. Happy day before Thanksgiving. I know a lot of you were saying you couldn't join live today, and I totally understand. After class tonight, I have to go home and cook, or at least prep. So as I don't like to spend my whole Thanksgiving cooking, you probably feel the same way. So I like to prep a lot the night before. But if you are here live, I'm so happy you're here. Tonight's new. I've tried to make this whole year new. I hope you see that. And what's interesting is next year is new too. Sorry. I don't like to repeat my classes and my teachings. It gets boring for me. So here we are. I see you, you see me. My microphone sounds distant. I'm telling you. It's right where it usually is, Mermaid Crystal, but you can tell me. Yeah, I'll keep talking, but it's right where it usually is. We didn't move it, so I did move it a little bit closer, but you can tell me if you can hear me okay. So I'm gonna ring my bell. I know, it's so exciting. It is such an exciting time. And it's Lauren's last live class before she starts her new job, which is super exciting that she totally manifested. You can hear me okay? Okay, so let me tell you about tonight. We have our tools. Oh, I forgot to bring my tools over in front of me. Let me grab them. Tonight, we gave you, I think, some of the most beautiful writing tools and some beautiful writing paper, and even a little fancy Nancy, this is our Creativity and Muses incense, which I think smells so amazing, and some fancy Nancy paper, because we're going to be doing some writing tonight. And I want to talk to you a little bit about why this tool is so important. We've offered glass pens before. I think we did a total upgrade on any glass pen we've ever done with this. And of course we did a sapphire ink, because for me sapphire is the color in the stone of wisdom. So tonight is all things writing. And on your worksheets, which I will look at with you, I don't want to spend too much time on them, because I've talked a lot about the mythology already with you. What's on here that we haven't specifically gone through are the specific muses. And it's interesting because I have 2 aunts who are named after muses. So we're not going to go like note by note on the worksheets, but we will go through them, because it does give you a deep dive. We have talked a lot about, in other sessions, on what's on page 2, kind of different strategies and techniques for channeling and creating inspiration and places and spaces for inspiration. We also talked last time, if you remember, and I thought that was an important conversation, about not just what encourages creativity, but also what blocks it. Sometimes you're going through experiences in your life or moments in your life that are very challenging, and those tend not to be your most creative moments. And so sometimes for me, the most important thing is to kind of work on my energy and my environment first before I work on my creative process and creative structure. Does that make sense? I'm seeing someone saying that they hope everyone is okay. So I'm not sure what happened in the feed, but let me know. Uh-oh, I think it's because Lynn's microwave just blew up. I hope you're okay, Lynn. Oh gosh. What are you putting in your microwave? There's nothing worse than having a microwave or an oven issue right before a holiday that kind of is focused on food. So I hope you're okay. So tonight we will look at our worksheets. We're not going to spend a lot of time on them, but I did want to talk to you a little bit about them. I do want to light our candle, because I will tell you a few things tonight. For me, fire is, when it comes to creativity, fire is very important as an element. It really does stimulate the sacral chakra, and it represents strength, transformation, so many different, like shape-shifting, right, moving between levels and layers of consciousness. And so fire is very important. I love to work with oils and essential oils too, and we'll talk about those in the worksheets as well. So if you're new, I don't think anyone is brand new tonight. I want to say that for the first hour and a half of class time tonight, which is usually how I roll, I'm going to be more focused on my teaching. Because if I try to focus on the feed and my teaching, as a lot of you know, sometimes I try to strike that balance in the first half, but it's actually better for everybody, especially when I'm talking about kind of technical stuff. Let me just give it a second. I think I just kind of blew it, so my lighter's lost a little fuse. When I'm talking about technical stuff, it actually is better for all of us. I'm going to light my sage and my candle and be creative. And then at the end is when I like to save time for question and answer. So if you have a question while I'm going and I don't see it, just know I'm not ignoring you. It's just me trying to give my full focus to the content that I spend a lot of time planning. And I think the more I do that, the clearer the kind of trajectory of thoughts are, okay? And we are going to actually be doing some writing together. Like I said, your tools for tonight are your glass pen and the little rest, so that you don't get ink on your table or your tablecloth. So you're supposed to lay it like that once you dip it in your ink. And then we gave you, that feels good. We gave you this beautiful container to hold your ink. I don't know that I have a funnel as the only, I might ask Team SG if you wouldn't mind, because otherwise I'm gonna get this all over the table. I think it came with a little funnel. But if Jared and Jasmine wouldn't mind coming and transferring the ink for me to this with a little funnel while I'm teaching, that would be super helpful. So I'm going to set that off to the side. Let me see in my box if my funnel's in here. I think it came with one. It doesn't look like it did. So yeah, if you guys wouldn't mind just transferring it really quick, that way when we get to that point, my tablecloth is blue, so it probably wouldn't show that much, but even so, it'll be a cleaner process. Yeah, so you can feel free actually to go off the feed too if you want. Some of you like to stay and chat in the feed, which I don't mind at all. But I just don't want you to think I'm ignoring you if I don't respond to your comments while we're in the first part of the session. So I'm going to find my incense burner. We've moved stuff around a lot, and then I lose my tools. Let me see if I can find my, give me 1 second. I'm still here, I'm just looking for my incense burner. You know what I can use? I can use my, no, that's probably not good. Give me just 1 second, y'all, and I'll be right back. Team SG is so busy today because we have so much to do ahead of the holidays, so I'm gonna DIY it today. So I've got an incense burner. I just want to burn a little bit of this Muse incense to get that party started too. So I'm gonna light just a little bit of that. A lighter is the only thing I don't have. I know, I feel bad. I kind of don't have all the tools of my trade tonight. So Team SG, I need help with ink and I need a lighter. We'll burn incense in just a minute. Okay. Let's go into the teaching because that I know I'm ready to do, and then we'll come back to tools and things. No, in fact, we're just getting started. So I'm really glad that you're here, and like I said, I want to wish you a happy early Thanksgiving. I'm going to focus on all the good content for tonight, and we'll come back to Q&A at the end. Okay. So, we're not going to start with the worksheets because the first thing I want to really begin with tonight, what I think is most important, is the writing process. And as a lot of you know, I used to teach writing for a living. Oh, thank you for messaging them. Yeah, I don't know if they watched the class, so I kind of just put an all hands call out to everybody. I used to teach writing for a living. I taught writing for, in different forms and capacities for like 15 years. So writing is probably, of all of the things that I'm most trained to teach, it's probably, what most people would consider my domain area of expertise. And I do love teaching writing, and I used to teach all forms of writing. I taught creative writing, I taught poetry, I taught grammar and mechanics. I'm not here to teach you grammar tonight. I don't want you to be scared that this is going to become a grammar class. It absolutely is not going to become that. What tonight really is about is the fundamental reason, and here's where I want you to double click on this. The fundamental reason why writing is so critical to the metaphysical, spiritual, energetic process. And I know some of you are going to say, I don't like to write, I'm not a good writer. Oh, thank you. Awesome. If you wouldn't mind transferring it for me, I would really appreciate it. That way I'm not kind of,
You need this into...
Yeah, it goes into that. I think it came with a pipette for them too. And then, thank you for my lighter so you can burn some incense. Okay, some of you are going to tell me that writing is not your thing. And I totally understand it. Everybody doesn't enjoy writing. When I used to have to teach writing, or didn't have to, I loved teaching writing. My students would tell me, this is my least favorite class at the beginning of the semester because writing is not my thing, or I'm better at math is what I heard a lot of the time, or I'm better at science, or I'm better at something else. And, okay, I'm going to leave it to Karen, by the way, there's some people are saying the microphone, they can't hear very well, so Karen, if you can bubble up if that's a concern, let me know. So if you feel like writing isn't your jam, tonight I think I'm going to unblock you around that. And I have some very specific techniques. I have a mentor I've never met that I want to mention to you, because if you don't have books by her in your library, and what's really cool is you can get them used on Amazon, so you don't have to go and buy her brand new books. So we'll get to her in a second too, because her process for me was very liberating. For most of us, when we grew up learning about writing, it was very structured, right? In primary and secondary school, it was like you learned how to write a sentence, it had a subject and a verb, right? And then you learned how to put sentences together in a paragraph. And then as you got further along in your education, like where my kids are now, it was like, oh, you have to have a thesis statement, and it has to have support and quotations and all this stuff. So writing made things very technical for people, writing classes when you're young, which is kind of the opposite or the antithesis of what writing is supposed to be and what writing actually was for our ancestors before we got into this kind of like pre-programmed way of thinking about writing, which in my opinion, even though I taught that at university for a lot of years, it kind of zaps people's creative essence, and it takes away, let's say someone is a natural poet. If they're stuck in that sort of academic, very linear process, it can actually stifle them and prevent them from wanting to pursue writing at all. And I don't know if any of you have ever felt like that. But I will tell you, even as when I sit down and I know I'm writing a book, even I will get very intimidated and go, okay, so it's got to have chapters. What's the first chapter? And I will get stuck in that trap of like, I've got to start with chapter 1. I can't, because even me, I'm like in a linear process. And what I've started to do even for myself when I'm writing whatever it is for SG or when I've written books in the past, it's like I can start with chapter 4. I don't have to start with chapter 1, right? If I'm more inspired to write the conclusion first, I can begin there. I can even within a chapter, I've taught myself how to start at the end of a chapter instead of the beginning of a chapter, if that makes sense. So for me, that's been very liberating. Tonight we're going to learn how to break the rules. And the reason, I'm going to make a claim that I think is a bold claim, you can feel free, as with everything I teach, to disagree. This is your brain. We are going to talk about neuroanatomy tonight. the reason writing is the #1 most important practice, in my opinion, and I know I'm biased, is that every single part of your brain is active when you write. That is not true when you speak. It is not true in any other waking state other than writing. Isn't that cool? A lot of people don't know that. So when people are like, why are you so passionate about writing? And why are we talking about writing in a class on magic? You know, it's because literally, when you think about it, every part of you comes into play. And I'm going to show you by showing you your brain and talking about what each part of your brain is doing when you're writing. And what's really cool, yeah, especially if you geek out on stuff like this. I don't know if my product camera is still set up from last night. It kind of is. Sorry for the mess. But maybe that would be helpful for me to put that there. I'm gonna talk to you about the structure of the brain, because this is something we all have in common, okay? A frontal lobe, a parietal lobe, that's misspelled by the way, I didn't make this, so I just took it off the internet. An occipital lobe, the cerebrum is part of your frontal lobe. We're talking about the red over here. The temporal lobe and the cerebellum, okay? And then, so this is kind of like a side view of your brain. Straight down the middle, right, is your pineal gland. And your pineal gland, I drew it for you. Look at my fantastic drawing of your pineal gland, which is your third eye, right? So boop, out here is your nose and your eyebrows. And then directly behind your, here, between your eyebrows is your pineal gland, which connects directly to the spinal cord. This is the spinal cord, and your spinal fluid comes up right through this channel, right? Which I believe is, we call it spinal fluid, but I believe it's your chakra juice, okay? So the reason that every part of your brain is active when you're writing, including your modern brain, which we call your executive brain, right? And your reptilian brain, your old brain, right? It's kind of the origin story of your brain, the first part of your brain, our brain to develop as Homo sapiens, is that every part of your brain has a job to do when you're writing. It's about processing information, integrating information, recalling things from memory. Like, what did I want to say here again? So that gets engaged. Your creative center gets engaged. Every single part of your brain is active. Let me turn down the music just a little bit because it might be too loud for you guys. Okay. So I have a couple of quotes that I like, that I kind of think about when I'm writing, and I wanted to share those quotes with you. I'm a quote person. When I hear quotes that really resonate with me, I always make a note of them. So these are the quotes I wrote down for tonight. One of them is, writing, and I think this is so cute, writing is the act of discovery of what you think. Sometimes we don't know what we think until we write it down. One tip I have for you is, when you are having a hard time, and because I do this myself, when I'm having a challenging time, I dedicate a journal to the challenge that I'm going through. And I don't filter. I write every single thing down. I did this when my mom passed away. Sometimes I throw them away. Sometimes I don't keep them. It's really not about going back and ever reading it again. It's about giving every part of my brain an outlet. How many of you are overthinkers? Overprocess? I'm an overthinker, but I'm an internal processor. I don't like to talk about my challenges with other humans. And it's not because I don't trust people or want to share things with people, but I don't feel better after that. Like, it doesn't always help me. I have a therapist, but I even tell her, like, I don't always feel better after talking to you. Don't take it personally. But I actually do feel better when I sit down and I give my hand a chance to engage all parts of my brain. The reason we don't feel better after talking about something, but we do feel better after writing about something scientifically, is that when we talk, we don't engage every aspect of the brain. So even as you're talking to somebody, you can still be processing things in another part of your brain that isn't getting activated. And so it's not scratching the itch. Does this make sense? Okay. So I can pay a therapist, I can talk to a friend and get off the phone or get off the Zoom and still go, that didn't help. Or I can journal for an hour and feel like it's all there. And then if it makes you feel better, so one of the tools and techniques that I learned from my therapist, who's also an energy worker for people like me, is to buy a shredder. I've told you this for years. I still do this. If something's happening, write it all down and shred it. If you're worried about somebody finding it or reading it, if that bothers you, sometimes it bothers me. I don't like to leave volumes of things. Like all my class notebooks, there's like 30 of these from my years of teaching in my house. I don't know what anybody will ever do with them because it's kind of gobbledygook. I mean, who's going to look at that? If you were in class last time, this will make sense to you because I was talking about do you remember this? The imagination pyramid and how it overlays with Maslow's hierarchy of needs and chakras and stuff. But like anybody else 100 years from now who picks this up is going to be like, what was she talking about? Unless you're around and you're like, no, she was talking about the pyramid of imaginative thought. Don't you remember? But anyway, so I don't know why I keep these, but I do. But like my personal stuff, I don't keep. I write it, I shred it, you can burn it, whatever you want to do. But I'm telling you, even if you're not a journaler, and some people don't journal, I'm not calling anybody out, because I don't know if it's you, but some people in my life are not journalers because they're afraid somebody's going to read it. And so that's where a shredder, which you can get for $19.99 on Amazon, I should sell them at Sage Goddess. We should make cute Sage Goddess shredders where you write all your shit down and it's purple and you just shred the fuck out of it and nobody's ever going to see it again. But I think you're better off just getting an Amazon shredder. I use my shredder all the time. Okay? Now, I'm not saying, by the way, that talking doesn't help. I'm not at all saying that. I'm saying talking doesn't engage every aspect of your brain the way writing does. So if you are finding that talking is not enough, or you find that you're talking a lot all the time about the same thing over and over again and it's not like scratching the itch, which is what happens to me, like, why would I talk to my friend, I talk to my sister, I talk to my therapist, I talk to my dog, and I still don't feel better. If you find yourself in that kind of situation, writing sometimes is the thing that will unlock the door. Does that make sense? And it allows you an outlet that I think is so important. And what stops people from doing it is, is my handwriting good? Am I writing incomplete thoughts? Is anybody going to read it? Like there's all these kind of internal blockages to writing. Or we compare ourselves to people. Like I've had people tell me, well, you've written, 4 books and they've all been bestsellers or whatever. Like I'm not as good a writer as you are. You taught writing for 15 years. I can't do what you do. But I'm not asking you to sit down and write a novel, and I'm not asking you to sit down and write an essay, with a thesis statement. I'm asking you to communicate what's in the core of your soul. And I'm telling you that one of the ways to access your deepest levels of creativity and creative potential that's kind of unlocked, or locked, I should say, and untapped, is to write through it, to write around it, to try and get to that nugget that is in your soul. And so I'm going to talk to you about a lot of techniques tonight. We're going to experiment with those techniques, and then I'm going to talk to you about on a spectrum of things, okay? There's conscious writing where, like, I'm very focused right now, right? I've had a ton of caffeine. I'm very focused. I'm in total beta state, Muggle town. All the way to dropping into theta state, like a trance, and doing something called automatic writing. Have most of you heard the story about my mom? I don't want to repeat it if like everybody's heard it. So if you know the story about my mom's automatic writing, it's the most incredible story of automatic writing for me that I've ever heard. I don't know that I've ever even heard of anybody else with a story like that. It's mind-blowing. But if everybody's heard it, I don't want to take your time to repeat it because a lot of you have been with me for a long time. But my mom was a really talented automatic writer. And what I mean by that is dropping into trance and not consciously writing. It's called psychography. Okay, so I will share it when we get to psychography. She stopped because her family was really pissed, which happens. Have any of you ever had a psychic experience and you share it with people close to you and they go, don't ever do that again? Because that's what happened to my mom. And she never did. Scared. I mean, I don't think she was so scared because she didn't know what she'd written until she shared it. And then when she shared it and everybody was like, where did you get this? And she was like, I wrote it. And they were all like, there's no way you wrote this, right? So I'll share the story with it. Even if you heard it before, maybe hearing it again, like Venus Queen said, with fresh ears might be interesting for you. Okay, so when we get there, I'll share it with you. So I will tell you, my mom's story even freaks me out a little bit. So if you ask me like, hey, have you really experimented with psychography? I will tell you the honest answer is no, and partly because her story freaked me out. It freaked her out enough never to do it again. So maybe if it's a gift that gets passed down, maybe my kids will overcome. You know how a few generations later you're like, well, let's give that a go. It was enough for me to go, I don't know if I want to do that. So people who really do psychography, where they are writing, but it is not them, it is a complete channel. And they're writing stuff there's no way they would know how to write. That can be a really intense experience, and for my mama it certainly was, and it was a shutdown. So I will tell you that story when we get there. Okay, so if writing is a process, a discovery of what you really think and believe, and if all parts of our brain get activated, one tip I want to give you, and I'm going to give you a lot of tips over the course of tonight, is listen to music while you write. And in particular, I want you to consider listening to vibrational music, right, that's composed in frequencies that will, allow you to tap into a more creative channel. So that's why I curate all of those playlists, and I play them all the time in my house, whether I'm writing a poem or I'm working on a book project or whatever it is I'm doing. Like today I wrote just a brief poem for Thanksgiving for Sage Goddess, right, to share with the community tomorrow. And it was like, I changed my playlist. I was like, what do I really want to feel when I'm writing this message to our community? Like what's the energy stream that I really want to connect with? And so I chose a song in Spanish to listen to that talks about gratitude. And I can share with you the song that it is. It's one of my favorites on my Moving Energy playlist. And it was interesting because I was before I wrote the poem, and I'm sharing this because it's so connected to what we're talking about tonight. Before I wrote the poem, I was a little bit stressed. Like my to-do list today was very long. I had a lot of like emails to get to and calls I was taking and making sure I was here for class and that my notes were all finished and all these things going on, and you know what I mean? And then tomorrow and meals, and do I have my brother's vegan menu worked out and my dad's low sodium menu worked out, and like, you know what I mean? Just those days when you're like ba-boom, 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 ba-boom. And as soon as I changed the music, and I changed the song, which I don't have my phone, but I'll share the song with you later, totally changed the vibration. And as soon as I changed the song, it was like the poem just flowed out. I literally sat there and just wrote it. I didn't even overthink it. It was just like, what wants to come through my soul? And I'm really lucky because there's people on my team, like Jackie, for example, and even though she's not here anymore, Tara, who's an incredible writer, like people who really fundamentally understand the art and beauty of writing. And I'm sure that comes through when you receive communication from Sage Goddess. There are quite a few people on the team who, Nick, for example, too, on our writing team, they're just kind of plugged in. It is one of their soul gifts. And so when they write, even when they write an email, there's moments when you're reading, or listings, Athena Mac, right? Like when you're writing and when you're reading listings at sagegoddess.com, and you might have a moment where you're like, that really connected with me, or how they said that, or how they phrased it. These people are professional writers, right? So they really understand this process. But again, my point to you tonight is you don't have to be a professional writer to get to that level. And every professional writer, I don't want to speak for like people on my team, but every professional writer I know follows kind of these same tools. We all get writer's block. We all get intimidated because then we read other people's really good writing and we go, oh, I don't know if I'm as good as that. Or what I'm going to challenge you to think about is how to get inspired. Do any of you read Victoria Erickson's poetry? I follow quite a few poets on Instagram, and Victoria Erickson always just hits me right in the heart. It's like, no matter what she writes, it's just right here. There's a lot of poets that I love, and I could make you a little list of some of my favorite poets too. And my taste in poetry ranges from like Bell Hooks, who was a very famous feminist sort of activist poet, more to like what I would call the modern romantics, like Victoria Erickson, who just kind of like, I hang on every word. Pamela Anderson sends a poem if you sign up on her mailing list. I've told you this before. Every Monday morning you get a poem. I don't know that she's professionally trained. I mean, but when you're reading her poetry, you are sucked into a totally different world. And then she always does a little drawing at the bottom. So for me, it's like, I always say it's like a sweet, rich dessert. Like I take each line in, and then I look forward to seeing her little doodle at the bottom of the poem. So every week it's different. It's like a bunny rabbit or a flower. And it totally just, I don't know, it's like honey. There's some sweetness to it that's really beautiful. But I also like poetry that kind of like hits you in the gut that isn't sweet. You know what I mean? That has an edge to it that isn't there to make you feel comfortable, but it's there to make you think differently, right? So some of you are mentioning poets in the feed too. So I think looking at who we love, and if you have a favorite poem, it would be so cool. Can you imagine that if you have time in the next couple of days in our Facebook group just to share a favorite poem that you love? I would really appreciate that. I have an album of them saved on my phone that's just like screenshots of people's poetry. So when I get writer's block, which happens, I use music to work around it most of the time, or I go outside and get my feet on the earth. And thank you for saying that about my poetry. I have written so many poems. I usually post them on my personal Facebook page. And I've often thought like I should anthologize those, you know, put those in some sort of container. I was going to write a poem for you tonight, but I wrote a poem for everybody for tomorrow. So when you get your email from SG, there's a little Thanksgiving poem, and I wrote that from my heart. So let's talk about your brain. And now for my lecture on neuroanatomy. I always say don't tune out. I don't want this to be boring for you, but sometimes we have to talk about technical things in order to understand the situation. Okay, so let me stand up so you can really see this clearly, because my camera's kind of far away. So this is your brain, okay? This part of your brain back here is your old brain, what we call the reptilian brain, okay? This part of the brain formed a long time ago. We all have a reptilian brain. This part of the brain is what we call your modern brain, okay, or your executive brain. So the human brain actually developed at different points. We all have two hemispheres. We all have this reptilian brain, this older brain, and the more modern brain. We all have this, okay? What's interesting is when you are stressed out, this part of the brain does your thinking for you. Have you noticed that? So when we go into stress, anxiety, fear, we're working back here in the cerebellum, the occipital lobe, and the parietal lobe. This is our sensing, perceiving. Okay? This isn't our expressing, analyzing stuff. Okay? Also, when you are in fight or flight mode, what happens to your memory? Have you ever had stress or trauma? What happens to your memory? It gets shitty, doesn't it? All of a sudden you're like when I'm under stress, my memory just goes poof, right? It's because the part of your brain that's responsible for encoding memory is not the part of your brain that's operating when you're under stress, okay? I will take a picture of this. It's really bothering me that there's a typo. Like I said, I didn't write this. I took it, so before I take a picture and give it to you, it's not parietal lobe, it's parietal lobe. But I'll take a picture of this and make sure you have access to it, okay? And you start drawing blanks. And do you know why that is? Because when you're under stress, your brain knows that is not what you want to remember. In psychology, we talk about disassociation, right? So when you are under extreme stress, your brain doesn't want to remember that. Your brain goes, nope, we're gonna we're going to eject that, and it doesn't write it to the hard drive. Okay, so the temporal lobe gets disconnected. The cerebellum, the frontal lobe, the modern brain goes into hibernation, so to speak, and then the back half of the brain, the ancient brain, your intuition takes over. Am I safe or am I not? Okay, and then it starts to communicate on a sensory level and on a primal level, and it activates what we call the God neurons in the limbic system. Okay, there are specific, I'm going to come back to my seat, there are specific neurons in the, and this isn't Athena making this up, there are specific neurons in the limbic system, which is the part of your brain that has your sense of smell. You know how you smell something but you can't describe it? You're like, oh, that reminds me of something. Like your limbic system is the old part of your brain that feels and smells, but it doesn't have language, because language came later. It's artistic, it's creative, but it doesn't know how to communicate. So it's kind of like, I always call it the grunting brain. So the part of us that really gets activated in terms of our psychic abilities lives in that limbic system. That's our oldest connection to source energy, and it's also our oldest connection to our species. Does that make sense? Now, let's talk about what happens when we're writing, because this is what I really wanted to share with you on this graphic. So when we are writing, okay, every part gets active. The frontal lobe is responsible for expression of language, what we call executive functioning. So our ability to analyze and synthesize information is our executive function. Okay, so when we're expressing something in writing and language, we are activating the frontal lobe. The parietal lobe is activated because we're sensing and perceiving. How do I feel right now? What's really going on? What are my deep thoughts that I want to express and communicate? The occipital lobe, okay, is responsible for our fine motor and written execution. So this back part of the brain, the occipital lobe and the cerebellum, are active because we're having to actually sit and take a pen or type on a keyboard and think about letters, okay? And then the temporal lobe is activated because it's having to look at what we've encoded to memory. This happened, that happened, this happened, that happened. When we're writing, we're not usually writing it specifically in the present tense, okay? And then the pineal gland gets activated because it's sitting in the middle of all this shit going, but what does it really mean? Does that make sense? So that's why all of this matters. When we're talking, we're not engaging the fine motor, right? Sometimes when we're talking, we're not even engaging the temporal lobe because we're not engaging the memory. We're talking about like today, right now. I feel like this right now. We're in the present moment. But sometimes we have to access the memory to really get into, and then sometimes we're not engaging executive function when we talk. We're not synthesizing information. We're not sitting there in a conversation with a therapist going, so what does it all mean? We're waiting for the therapist to tell us what it all means. When we're writing, we are synthesizing. When I was 5, this happened, and so now at 50, here's what I take from that experience, and here's how I make meaning of it, or I make sense of it, right? Sometimes we do that when we're talking, but we don't always do it. But when we're writing, we tend to be pulling from all these different aspects and synthesizing. So there's a sense, when did the modern brain form? I don't actually have a time stamp on that for you. It's just been an evolutionary process over millions of years. And I'll tell you, I think we were probably happier without it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that language, who am I to talk, right? I mean, I have executive function, so do you. So could we really say that we were happier when we just had the limbic system? Now, our animals don't have executive function. I don't know, sometimes they seem a lot happier. Paxton is not somewhere sitting right now going, yesterday I shit on the gym floor and I felt embarrassed. But today, the way I'm choosing to process that is that I am a dog and sometimes I have to poop. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't what's happening for him. I'm just saying. I don't know that it makes us all that much happier. It does make us more creative in the sense that we're able to take our thoughts and manifest them into form, right? It allows us to take an idea and then think through with the executive function. Google says it's 100,000 years. Google's always right. I don't know. Let's go with 100,000. I like it. It's a big round number, a bunch of zeros. Sounds very accurate to me. Okay. My voice sounds like I'm happy. I am kind of happy. I don't know. I definitely have a little pep in my step today, but I'm also excited to cook for my family. It's always a big serotonin boost for me to do that. So that's one of my creative outlets. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know. Are animals happier than we are? Maybe not. Maybe they are. Can't really ask them. Paxton doesn't communicate as clearly as I would like. Okay. Now, does that all make sense for a minute? I do want to stop now and just say, do you have any questions about the brain anatomy part? Probably would be better to take those questions now before we go into the super woo-woo, airy-fairy, not brain part, where you actually have to shut your brain down to do it, because psychography requires that we don't engage the executive function. Because it can't really happen if you're in that. If you're, like, I couldn't do automatic writing right now. I'm too much in the cerebral analysis paralysis moment. Thank you for that. Typing is the same as writing. Because again, you have to be keying, right? In order to type, for me it's the same process. I have to be engaging that executive function. I can't just type gobbledygook, right? I have to be using punctuation. There's a keyboard, right? And it's got letters in a certain order. So for me, I get as much of a writing high out of typing as I do out of handwriting. Now, having said that, this is my class notebook for 2023. It's all both sides of every page. And none of this is typed. Sorry. Your worksheets are typed. But I don't do any, I'm very old school. All my notes for every class I've ever taught are all handwritten. So do I really get the same experience out of handwriting or typing as I do out of handwriting? I can't process quite the same way. But that's just me personally. Some teachers I know, professors I know, every single thing for every single class is typed. And they're so organized, and that's so cool. And like if they want to go back to their notes from 2017, it's all in a file, you know, and they just click on September 2017, and that's so nice for them. That's not who I am. Okay. Talking and using sign language. Sign language is still going to engage all functions. It's still a method, right? So you have to think of the sign just like you would think of the key, just like you would think of the letter you're writing. The reason that talking is not the same is it doesn't require the level of executive function that writing and keystrokes and sign language requires you to engage in, okay? I live in 2023 too. I just can't give up my handwriting. I know. And talk to text is not the same thing. And I end up sending things to people that just doesn't make any sense. And I'm always just like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean. I end up sending naughty things most of the time when it's late, and I'm like, oh, let me just, voice text or whatever. And then I send it, and I'm like, oh, God, sorry, that's not what I. Let me just not do that. Yeah. You don't, when you teach, you handwrite too, and you don't type out the notes. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the thing. I also take notes when I'm listening to people, and I don't look at what I'm writing. I do this during plant ceremony too. It drives my shaman nuts. I haven't done plant ceremony in almost 2 years, which is really crazy, but That's a story for another time, but he would tell you, if he was here, he would roll his eyes and say, because half the time I'm like, oh shit, I forgot my notebook. And then I ask him to go and find my notebook and bring it to me. And then so wherever I am laying, I literally lay with my eyes closed but my hand like this. And that's when I do my psychography. And then I turn the page and I keep going. And I turn the page and I keep going. And sometimes I will leave. There was one ayahuasca journey where it was like 20, 25 pages of just. So I don't have to be conscious, and I don't read it. So I'm just going through. But there have been at least 2 or 3 times where I've looked up at him after we took medicine and said, I forgot my notebook. And I remember one time he was just like, shit. Because he had to go and get it. But I look at my notes now, I still have them from all those journeys, and they make sense to me. They just don't look, they're not pretty. Like I didn't write on the lines, and like sometimes it's pictures, and sometimes it's like, I write in a circle, like I'm turning the notebook and I'm writing in a circle and I'm turning the notebook. It doesn't look like human stuff, but it's, still valuable. Okay. Spirit writing, psychography. I'm going to teach you what it is like, and then I'll tell you my mom's story. Yeah. Well, so no, I don't. It's interesting. Karen's asking, would you consider that similar to what your mom experienced? I don't think so, because my mom was not working with ayahuasca or any kind of like psychedelic, mood-enhancing, mind-altering anything. My mom actually just knew how to drop into a trance. I think she was actually better at it than I am, to be honest with you. We didn't talk about it very much because my mom was one of those people who did all these things, but she didn't talk about it. And do you know what my mom's favorite way was of dropping into a trance? Which is really, might be interesting to you. And it doesn't do the same thing for me. She transcribed the Bible. She would buy herself a 3-ring binder and fill it with notebook paper, and she would sit with her Bible and her glasses and just start writing. In the beginning there was light, and she would just sit and transcribe word for word the Bible. And she would go into this really deep trance when she did it. And she had notebooks. I don't know where they are now. I actually think that's a story I don't know if I should tell. It doesn't feel like my story to tell, but I think she destroyed them. So let that story go. But I do remember being late at night, and I do remember her having a spiral notebook and having the Bible open and literally just like transcribing every single, in beautiful handwriting, by the way, word for word for word, and she would drop into a major trance. In fact, me talking about her doing it kind of gets me a little soft. And she's not the only one. If you go online and Google that is a thing that some people do. They transcribe sacred text word for word, and it kind of puts them into a trance. Okay. Now, so psychography is a form of free writing. You go into a trance state, whatever form that you use. My mom transcribed the Bible, would put her in a trance. And then you put your hand on the paper. Usually people use their non-dominant hand. So for me, that would be my left hand. And they start writing without looking at what they're writing. Okay. You have to be in a really deep trance. I'm glad it's helpful. The only thing I don't feel like it's okay to share with you is why she destroyed it, because it doesn't feel like my story to share, but she did. And I think she did it multiple times. But I guess it was kind of like us talking about shredding things, right? Like maybe not everything needs to be kept. Most people who do psychography, they set an intention, okay? Like, my intention is to think about my next steps in my career. And then they usually will say a prayer of some kind. I think that's why my mom was transcribing the Bible, because it was a form of going into like a deep trance state with prayer. And then there's different things that come out of it. Like, most of us think of writing as, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? But people who do psychography will have like a drawing over here and a couple of words here, and then they'll start writing sentences in other directions. So Do you know what I'm saying? So we think of writing as, again, as being a very linear process because we're all conditioned by formal education. But psychography can look like sentences down the right, writing in circles, drawing shapes and figures, and then taking, you know, it's almost like mind mapping and taking lines off of that and drawing other pictures. And sometimes it doesn't even make any sense. And then later you look back and you're like, oh, I think those were light codes, or I think those were hieroglyphics, or you know, like a different alphabet kind of thing. Yeah, does that make sense? Okay. So, going back to my notes. The author I wanted to tell you about, and somebody I think you might really enjoy, is Julia Cameron. Anybody familiar with Julia Cameron's books? Julia Cameron is well known for her creative writing techniques and teachings. She has this concept of morning pages, which I love, because oftentimes in the morning, it's especially if you're a busy person, if you're a mom, or if you have a job, or if you take care of aging parents, or you know what I mean? The morning, especially if you wake up early, can sometimes be the only kind of carved out space you have when you're not tired. I think she didn't call it night pages because by the time most of us get home and we've cooked dinner or had dinner, or, you know, unwound, or finished all the tasks of the day, we're tired. We don't want to get into a creative space usually. Some people it's different. I have a friend who's a musician, and he would say the opposite, that he would do night pages because he's a musician, so he sleeps all day and he writes all of his lyrics and does all of his post-production and music and stuff at night. But I'm saying most of us who have to be awake in the morning and have things and responsibilities before 9 a.m., 10 a.m., morning, right, sadhana is your time, like that kind of sacred space time before the world is asking things of you. Weekends are good for that too, although even my weekends are kind of occupied, right, with responsibilities and different things. So it's a form of creative brainstorming, what she does. And her morning pages, one of her main principles is let go, like I've been telling you all night, letting go of convention. When Athena Mack on my team and I were talking about this, she was talking about stream of consciousness, right? Like just writing what comes and not needing to make sense of it, not needing to analyze it. In a way, it's like releasing that executive function from the frontal lobe, right? The frontal lobe wants to say, so what, or why are you doing this, or do you have to do this right now, or this doesn't make sense. Like the frontal lobe is trying to organize information and synthesize it and make sense of it and package it. And so we have to release some of those expectations and conventions in order to get into a creative space. Okay, so some of my tips are, for if you want to try this psychography thing, is let go of thinking things have to be linear. Make sure you open a circle. I wonder if my mom would have had the experience I'm going to tell you about if she'd opened a circle. And I'll never know because she didn't know what that meant. I mean, my mom was not like a trained metaphysical practitioner, and we had those conversations later in life where she was like, I didn't really know about sage and black tourmaline, and I knew prayer, right? But I didn't really know like there were stones or there were herbs or selenite or different things, you know what I mean? So she was like, I just wonder if my experience would have been different if I'd had some of those tools and techniques. Who's to know? Because I don't necessarily think it was a bad thing that came through her. It just certainly wasn't her, right? So she, in her case, it was another soul that came through and was writing through her. And I'll tell the story in just a minute. Let go of expectation, as I said, play music, keep the music high vibrational, so things that are composed in a vibrational frequency that's supportive of spiritual work. You know, I mean, again, some people, again, my musician friend would be like, fuck that, I'm going to play Metallica or whatever. But for me, it's kind of like, but Metallica has actually composed a number of their songs in 432 hertz, so I should probably use a different example, but not all musicians from all genres compose their music or record their music in a high vibrational frequency. Okay, so I don't know. I don't know if she would have had the same experience. I think everything happens the way it's supposed to. It certainly shaped her path, and it was very much an imprinting moment for my family. So the last thing I want to say before I tell you her story, and then I have one more thing to tell you about, which is about poetry. And then we're going to write, and then there'll be questions. So I think we have time for everything. I don't want to rush through this because it feels important to talk to you about each one of these things, but I'm also mindful of the time. So I know the brain anatomy stuff can get kind of overwhelming, left brain, right brain. But I think it's also important to think about conscious versus subconscious mind, okay? And sometimes it's easier to think about it that way, that your conscious mind is, you know, like for me right now, my conscious mind is, I'm here teaching with you, and then I have like 4 things I have to do tonight to prep dinner tomorrow. So my conscious mind is just aware of all of that. My subconscious mind doesn't think any of that has any hierarchy. My subconscious mind is like, I'm actually kind of relaxed right now, and that sky right now is the most beautiful shade of blue, and I feel a deep sense of inner peace and gratitude, which I really do today. There's an energy of gratitude in the field, and not everything in my life is like right and perfect, but there's some things that are really good, and I have so much to be thankful for. So that's my subconscious mind. My conscious mind is like, yeah, but you know what I mean? I've got 6 things I have to get done before I go to bed tonight. And so the creative process for me when it comes to writing is, and we can look at the goddesses and the essential oils and the processes and all of that, but I think what it really boils down to is we have to make space for both of those sides of you to have a voice. The conscious, awake, aware, I'm right here, I'm in class, I've got 3 other things I want to teach tonight, it's really important to me for your learning objectives, right? I want to make sure I answer all your questions. Conscious, right? Waking beta state. And then the subconscious, which is, there's such a bigger conversation behind what we're talking about. And I actually think that writing can heal you. And my goal tonight is to get you to think about writing in a different way, even if you love it, to give you some kind of like one hint or technique or whatever that might make your process just a little more refined or different or interesting for you. Both sides have to be active. So my mom's story, I always try to remember if I was born or not. And most of my mom's metaphysical stuff that she did was before I was born, most of it. Like she used to hold seances at work after hours, and she did shit that, you know, was a little, I don't think I was born yet when this happened. If I was very small, okay? And she was experimenting with automatic writing. So, and I recall her talking about using her non-dominant hand, her left hand, although my mom was ambidextrous. My mom was a hairdresser, and she could cut hair perfectly with her right hand and her left hand, which if you've ever tried to cut hair, I'm actually not even good at cutting hair with my dominant hand. If I tried to cut your hair with my left hand, you would fire me, right? So my mom was able to use both of her hands equally well, which is a really special gift. So she had sat down to channel this, whatever this was. And I remember her saying, I just put my hand down and the stuff started to come through and I wasn't even really looking at what I was writing. And she said, when I was done and I looked down at it, I realized it wasn't English. It didn't look like English, okay? And, you know, to this day, and I have asked her, I had asked her so many times about this because I think I just didn't want to forget. And I think it's cool that it's kind of memorialized even in these classes and stuff, and that you guys know it so that it doesn't get forgotten. You know how generations go by and some of these really interesting things that our ancestors did like get lost. So she looked down and she was like, I don't know what this says. I'm going to take it to my mom, right, as we would all do. And my grandmother looked at it and said, I don't know this language either, but your Uncle Al, so my mom was Marie, my grandmother was Pearl, and Pearl had a sister named Maxine. And Maxine was married to Al, and Al had been in the war, World War II, I believe. And he was a prisoner of war, okay? And he spoke multiple languages. She was very smart. And so my mom showed my grandmother, she didn't know. My grandmother showed my Aunt Maxine, and she didn't know. But Aunt Maxine was like, let me show it to Al. So, I mean, imagine this, okay? Really think about what I'm telling you, because it's holy shit crazy. And everybody has verified it. My grandmother told me, I swear to you, that is the damn truth, and I still don't understand it. Al gets it, starts reading it. Al reads German, okay? It's in German. Not only is it in German, and my mom never studied German, ever, it's in good German, okay? And no, it doesn't exist. They destroyed that thing so fast. It was a letter written to Al from the person he was in prisoner of war camp with. Again, my mom doesn't know what it is. She gives it to my grandmother. I don't know what this is. Gives it to her sister. I don't know what this is. But Al reads a bunch of languages. Let's see. How does it happen that it's written to Al from somebody who died with him as a prisoner of war? So Al reads it and goes, where did you get this? And my mom goes, why? What does it say? And he said, where did you get it? And she's like, I wrote it. And he's like, no, you didn't. And she's like, yes, I did. And I mean, it was a thing. Like, it was a whole thing of like, no, where did you get this? Like, there's no way. Like, there's just no way you did this. And they're like, how did you do it? She's like, I don't know. I just put the pen down and I started writing and that. And then she's like, I don't know. I'm sorry. And it was just like, the net of it was, you don't ever do that again. Whatever that is that you just did, you don't ever do that again. Okay? So it got destroyed. Nobody wanted to talk about it. When I used to go, tell me again, because it's just such a crazy story. You have to think about the layers of that. Not only did that energy right through her, but it knew that she was going to go to those three people who would eventually get it to him, and that he would read it. Now, it was a positive letter. It was just an affirmation of like the experiences that they had in the war camp together. But I mean, the moment of like, what did you do? You know, and you as like a metaphysical person going, I don't know, I'm sorry. I don't know, I just put my hand down and shit started happening. I don't even know. So that's my best. I've never to this day heard somebody top that. Cheers, Mom. Now, my mom did not ever automatic write again. It was enough to scare her, and it was frankly enough to scare me out of really doing it. Yeah, well, the White Owl story that happened to my mom, the aliens came after that, and nobody wanted to talk about that either. My grandmother my grandmother told me the last time she talked to me about it, like, I'll talk to you about this one more time, and then you don't ask me about this again. Which is why it's so believable. I mean, she literally was like, this is the last time. Well, my grandmother had had the other experience with the automatic writing and then the actual spacecraft landing right in front of her and just going, I mean, you're wide awake. What are you going to say? It's right there. It's as close as like the car in the parking lot out there, right? So there's some stories in my family that nobody can deny, and especially because my grandmother validated it all, and she was like, I'm never talking about this again. That does not jive with my spiritual beliefs, so we're not doing that. But it does tell you that it's real, and I think the importance of all of this is, first of all, I do believe that channeled spirit writing is a thing. I believe the spirit world is real. I think it's really vast. I think it's really interconnected, and I think it's governed. Like, I think they know that they could get you to do something that would end up in the hands of somebody. So we don't think about how orchestrated the universe is, but it's highly intelligent, and it's all guided by, you know, we think we're in control of everything, but it's like, no, you're going to do this, and then this person's going to take that, and then they're going to take it over here, and it's going to end up with that, then you're going to end up with this, and that's how it's going to go. And meanwhile, we're still at step one, right? Like, I'm just writing some stuff down. I don't know. It doesn't look like English to me, right? So I think it's good to do things in a container. I do wonder sometimes if she had opened a circle, would the energies have been the same to produce something like that, right? And I do know also that the universe knows who's able, right? Who's opening the channel, who's able to access the energy. But I do know too, like my mom was very cautious with me when I first started working with magic when I was 15, 16 years old. She would tell me, like, just be careful. Like, it's, at the time I didn't really put together like why she was telling me that. And then as I learned more and more about her stories, and then she had her full UFO experience and stuff that my whole family has documented, like, it's just, you start to realize the universe is so much bigger than we acknowledge and appreciate it to be, that we have to have reverence for the expansiveness of it. So what I will say is, I think there's a spectrum from I'm going to sit down and write out my grocery list, right, and my to-do list, all the way to I'm going to drop into some crazy ass trance state, which, like I said, my mom didn't need anything to do it. And then just put my hand down and let whatever come through and communicate. And I don't know that that's always the safest thing to do, but I also know in some cases, you know, I think my uncle was really freaked out by it, but, and you have to remember, this was like 1960 something. This isn't 2023, right? I mean, in the 80s and 90s, I was weird for doing what I do. In the 2000s, I was weird for what I do. In the 60s, automatic writing, you channeled something. What? It's just like we have to really remember how different and more contracted our world was around some of the metaphysical stuff. What I would say is there's a couple of rules for this, right? I think you have to know kind of what side of things you're on, and that doesn't mean necessarily what you believe in, but sort of like what energies you serve. I think that's really important to be clear about, right? That when you do card readings, or you do automatic writing, or you do channeling of any kind, that you acknowledge that you are trying to be a channel and a conduit for the highest possible good, right? My friend who does readings for me like once every 3 months always says, I only want to receive messages that are in service to her highest good. That's all I'm here for. Anything else, not acknowledged, not the channel is not open to that, right? So it just kind of creates a boundary. Yeah, no, we were super weird. I only stopped being weird in the last like 5-6 years. I mean, I was really worried when I started Sage Goddess that the kids were going to get into high school and their friends were going to be like, your mom does what? And now it's like really cool and almost normal. So it's like, oh yeah, Sage Goddess, like gemstones, NBD. Whereas I was like, oh my God, they're going to be like, kids are going to make fun of them for this. I mean, we've really come a long way. But I do think you have to acknowledge what kind of energies and messages you're going to be willing to allow to come through your channel, and really be clear about what you serve on the highest order, right? Because there are lighter forces in the universe and there are darker forces in the universe, and sometimes I have found that and this is why I'm always like open book with you guys, like I have just found like the darker stuff is a little more wily coyote, you know what I mean? It can use and appear as if, and it can manipulate to look like, almost like, you know, a wolf in sheep's clothing kind of thing. So I'm just, in my own practice, I'm just very, very clear. This is what's in, this is what's out. If you're coming from these lower vibrations and you're in service to a darker energy, that stuff exists. Some people like it. It's just not my jam, and it's not welcome where I am, and I'm not entertaining it. I'm not going to be a good host for it. There's lots of people who are willing to do that. I've seen what it can do. I'm not interested. But I won't judge you if that's what you do. It's just it isn't probably, you're probably not really super excited to work with me if that's what you're doing. But there are people who open those containers and are about like letting whatever in. And that's why even now, like right now when I do a little creative writing with you, it takes 2 seconds to just say, you know, what serves the light is allowed in, what is not in service to the light is not. Oh, and so it is. And would that have made a difference in her experience? If there's time during Q&A and you want to hear the UFO story, I'm super keen to share that with you too. I do feel like there's some stories I don't share because some of them were really weird. There are stories I've never shared. It got really weird when I was a kid. I really grew up around. There were a couple of times where it got really weird. So I don't always share all those stories because it's like, you know how some stories you just know are like okay for you to share because she shared them a lot, and then there's some stories where like it happened and nobody ever talked about it, and I'm like, probably shouldn't talk about that. So I don't share all the stories. Some of them I never will probably, but the UFO story was pretty, everybody knew it. She drew pictures of it. My grandma was so freaked out. Poor thing too. I mean, talk about a minister all her life. Now she's 25, 30 feet from a UFO with straight up aliens. Like, it would be like me and my product team out in the next room, straight up aliens. Like, what do you do? And you can't move. You're just like, what do you do? You can't blink and go, this isn't happening. You can close your eyes and blink, but it's still there. Well, shit. But it did. There's some stuff that's really weird. If I told you, you'd be like, all right, you were right. That's really weird. So I have opened a circle. I want to talk briefly about the Greek goddesses. This is on page 1 of your worksheets, because you may want to like tap into their energy field. Calliope. I want to talk about the structure of a poem too. I'm going to be really brief about this because I actually would encourage you to write a poem tonight. And you're going to be like, write a poem. They look just like what you see on Google. I swear. What they drew and described to me anyway. I think there's different kinds of aliens. They saw the ones with the big black eyes and the little bodies and stuff. Okay, structure of a poem. I used to teach poetry for whole semesters, so I'm going to condense it down into a very simple lesson for you. If you do not feel like you can write and you have writer's block or a throat chakra blockage, I want you to do me a favor tonight and I want you to write a poem as we use our ink, okay? Let me explain to you what a poem is. Poems, let me explain what poems aren't. They do not rhyme most of the time, okay? It's not like, there once was a woman named Sally. She lived in the San Fernando Valley, right? We've been taught that like poems always rhyme. Sometimes they do, most of the time they don't. I don't write poems that rhyme, okay? They are written in lines, and usually a small grouping of lines that we call a stanza. So what looks like a paragraph in a poem is actually called a stanza. And the lines can be very short, and not all of them end in punctuation. Like, my Thanksgiving poem for tomorrow was just about, you know, how grateful I am for you all and how it's like a really hard time on our planet and how we have to look for grace and because that's the root word of gratitude, right? Is just have grace for other people, have grace for yourself. Each stanza, so you just write lines, right? I'll just like brainstorm one with you. Let me write a poem about Paxton with you right now. Paxton, let me really do it. Paxton came into my life, an unexpected gift. And at first I thought he might have been too much. That would be a stanza. That's true, actually. But I realized I didn't rescue him. He rescued me. And he forced me to play at a time when I was taking my life too seriously. That's a stanza. And he revived in me a little bit of my child essence. And every day when he makes me laugh, I remember how I thought he might have been too much. That would be a stanza. That's a poem. It's not a long story, right? Limericks are fun too, right? It's just like out of your soul, right? The grammar doesn't have to be great. The punctuation doesn't even have to be there. You don't have to punctuate it at all, right? So, Little stanzas, which are groupings of lines. You don't have to worry about punctuation unless you want to. However, punctuation is really important. Commas and semicolons make your reader stop a little bit, take a breath. A period makes your reader stop for a full inhale, exhale. So when you give them a comma, you go, pause there, right? Like, so when I was telling you, and sometimes, right? Sometimes, comma. When I'm playing with him, comma. I remember how originally I thought he might have been too much. Period. Full stop, right? This gives you, punctuation is telling your reader how to breathe, okay? When you make a break between your stanzas, it has to be very intentional, because what you're saying is, I'm done with that thought. I'm moving on to my next thought. Take a breath, I'm moving on to the next thought, right? Paxton's gonna get trained as a service dog, but right now he's too. Once his cojones are gone, we can really do some service dog stuff. Okay, so Calliope, these are the 9 muses in Greek mythology. Like I said, I have 2 aunts who were named after them. One of my favorite aunts, Thalia, and then my other aunt, Terpsy. We called her Terpsy, but her name was Terpsichore. Calliope is the muse of epic poetry. What's an epic poem? A long-ass poem. Think Iliad, Odyssey, big long poems. Clio, the muse of history. Nobody talks about Clio because most of us don't think of history as being inspiring. I do, but she's not as popular as Euterpe, who's the muse of music. Remember, lyrics to songs are poetry. They're written in stanzas. They have something called a refrain, right, where they repeat a line, becomes the melody, right? Thalia, the muse of comedy, and my Aunt Thalia was really funny. She's one of my dad's favorite sisters. Melpomene, who was the muse of tragedy. Nobody talks about Melpomene because she was sad. She was a bummer. Terpsichore, who was my Aunt Terpsy, the muse of dance, and she did dance when she was young. Erato, who's the muse of love poetry and erotic poetry, so she's sexy. Polyhymnia, who's the muse of hymns and sacred poetry, kind of religious poetry too, and then Urania, who's the muse of astronomy and astrology and poems about the stars. So, Terpsy and Thalia. My other aunt's name was Thea, and then I had an aunt named Marika. So I had 3 aunts. My dad's 3 sisters were Thalia, Marika, and Thea. Thea means goddess, so they all had good names. And my dad's mom's name was Photini, which means light of God, because phos in Greek means light. Okay, so these muses show up as influencers, experts, people we consider mentors. In Hindu, at the bottom of the page, Sarasvati is the goddess of music and the arts. Among the Norse gods, Bragi is associated with poetry and storytelling. Thoth, or Thoth, is the ancient god of writing. And on the next page it goes down. We've talked about a lot of these things. And then herbs and oils. Rosemary and thyme are known for remembrance. So if you're trying to kind of like access your creativity through your memory, you want to work with rosemary and thyme. By the way, we learn a lot of that from Shakespeare. Shakespeare wrote about the herbs in quite a few of his plays, which I loved Shakespeare when I was studying Shakespeare. Mugwort enhances your dreams. It's a mild hallucinogenic. Lavender relaxes you, so does valerian, so that'll get you into a relaxed state, again, activating different parts of your brain, especially the limbic system. Basil actually helps to activate the frontal lobe because it's for mental focus and clarity. Peppermint does the same thing. And then ginger, which has stimulating properties. Blue lotus activates the pineal gland and the thalamus and the hypothalamus, which is the center part of your brain that houses your intuition. We covered a lot. So let's do a little writing and then I'll answer questions. On these nights when I do like, hey, let's talk about neuroanatomy and then let's talk about ancient Greek mythology and then let's talk about aliens, I feel kind of like my brain gets stretched in all these different directions. It's like neuroplasticity. But it's good for us. Keeps us young. So they're fun names, and if you don't have children, or sometimes it's fun when you get a new dog or a new cat, and you're like, what's a cool name for a cat? Like Calliope. You can call it Callie. Isn't that cute? The Muse of Poetry and Eloquence, or Thalia. I think Thalia is a beautiful girl's name. Urania. When I was growing up, I always thought Terpsy was a weird name. I don't know. I don't know. Like, it just didn't seem like a cool name until I learned she was named after one of the muses, and I'm like, oh, Terpsichore. Because nobody ever called her Terpsichore. Everybody called her Terpsy. Okay, so we're going to dip our ink, or our pen, into our ink. The bigger hole here, and then you can use the smaller hole to kind of like dry it off. So you get your ink from your bigger hole, honey, and then you dip it in your smaller hole to dry it off. And you can actually sit your pen like this too, which I just think that's beautiful. So you don't have to use this as a rest for it. You can actually just keep your pen in the container like this. But I want you to first set an intention. Turn on some music if you want, or just listen to me and let me kind of like relax you into the moment. And I want you to set an intention for your poem. We gave you some really beautiful handmade paper. If I'm not mistaken, I think the paper has seeds in it. Or no, it's sage leaves, which is really cool. So set your intention for what you want your poem to be about. And you can choose to look at the page or not look at the page. I want you to, if you don't want to write a poem, by the way, I can't tell you what to do. I'm not there. I'm not your boss. But what I would like you to do is write just the first line. So think about your subject and your intention. What do you want to write about tonight? What really matters to you right now? What's on my heart to write is a little gratitude note to my kids. I've been really thinking the last couple of days. Isn't that funny? I'm really grateful to have my kids and for who my kids are. They're really remarkable people. And I look at them sometimes and I'm like, I can't believe I made those people. Like, it's just insane. I have those moments all the time. I guess it's because they're getting older. So I want to write a little Thanksgiving poem to my kids. So the first line doesn't have to be many words, just the first line, not even the first full thought. And don't worry about your handwriting. And you can keep dipping as many times as you need to. But you'll be amazed. I was able to write the whole first line just with one dip of the nib into the ink. So I wrote, I am amazed by you. And I'm going to write the date on it. Today is the 22nd of November, which is 11/22. It's a master number, so 11/22/23. And just keep going. Write another line. So I wrote, I am amazed by you both, my beloveds, treasures of my heart. It's a poem. And then that's a stanza, okay? So a group of lines, that's my first full complete thought. Now I'm gonna put one finger of space and I'm gonna write again. Yeah, write this to your fur babies, write this to your partner, write this to yourself. Write a love note to yourself. That's a fun challenge, isn't it? And when you start to sense you're low on ink, just dip it again. Amazing how far you can get with the ink, right? When I'm handwriting poetry, I have a little homage to my mom. Can I show it to you? She always did this, and it's my favorite thing about her handwriting. So when my mom would write "and," she always did it. Do you see how like it would go at an angle? I just thought that was cool. She didn't do it every single time, but most times when she would write pride and gratitude, she would do the "and," and it would be like in a vertical line instead of straight across. So if you want to start doing that, that's your little homage to Mama Paracas. Maybe there's somebody in your family that did something cool with their handwriting. So my second stanza is, I watch you from near and afar, and often it is when you don't notice that my heart fills most with pride and gratitude. I'll put a comma right there after notice. Okay, and then again, give yourself some space and write your last stanza. And just let it flow from your heart. So here's my poem. I added to my Zoe and Nick. And then at the bottom I wrote, how lucky am I that you chose me, so imperfectly perfect, to be your mom. Oh, how I love you, comma, both. That's a poem. And it's again, you might go, well, I don't know how to write poetry, or I'm not a poet, or, oh, you know. It's a great poem. It has a stanza, has 3 stanzas. Each stanza is a complete thought. Each stanza is composed of lines. You used your punctuation with intention, doesn't have to rhyme. And then I love them both. And I always blow my breath, like when I sign a book for you, or when I write something special to someone, I always blow my breath across it, partly because it dries the ink, but partly also because it's my life force. So wherever they find this one day, I keep journals for them, so I'll probably write a second one of them and put one in each journal. I also want to write that it's Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving Eve. And if you wrote a poem and you feel like sharing it in our group, I would love to read your poem. And cheers. Listen, they both do some shit sometimes. But man, if we all were loved on the basis of doing some shit sometimes, I don't know. I think we'd all be in trouble. But the amazing things they do outweigh the things they do that kids do. Isn't that cool? Yeah. Well, and you may go, well, I don't like it, or you know what, you may go, we gave you a few sheets, right? What I would tell you is, even if you don't like your poem right now, you may look back at it later and go, that was actually really good. I was being hard on myself, or I don't know, I thought it should have sounded like a, whatever poet you love most, Adrienne Rich, or somebody who's like a poet, poet laureate, Maya Angelou, right? Like, it doesn't sound like Maya Angelou. But you might look back on it and think, that's actually really lovely. And then what you can do, you don't have to, but you can also like take your oils, because this paper holds a scent, and so you can take your whatever perfume you love and sort of run your hand around the edges and scent your paper. It's kind of cool. So with that, I did want to leave plenty of time for questions, because it's 4:37. And I know we covered a lot of territory tonight, so anything and everything is on the table. Again, we covered brain stuff, so if you have questions about the neuroanatomy, I'm happy to dive into that a little bit more. We covered psychography and automatic writing, so any questions you have about that. Not that I'm like the world's expert on that, but I have experience. Oh, thank you for that. Bradley said, Athena, this is by far the best class of the year for me. I write all the time, and this opened up my world. Yeah. Your Living Mist would be really cool. You could spray the whole page, but I would tell you, even with the Living Mist, I tend to just like spray a little bit on my wrist and use my wrist as a palette. Do you do that? And then take it to the edges so that you don't kind of blur your ink. But it will hold the scent. Isn't that beautiful? I'm so glad you enjoyed today. I was excited to talk about it, to be honest with you, because like I said, writing has been the hardest thing for me, because even people who are professional writers, we get writer's block. So the biggest misconception is like those of us who do this professionally, and like I said, I've taught it all my life, and I'm a very good technical writer. I've been an editor. I've taught my kids grammar. They both can diagram a sentence like nobody's fucking business. But if they couldn't, like, somebody should revoke my degrees. Do you know what I mean? So I'm definitely like when you have an English test, I'm definitely like your bestie, for all that stuff. But my kids crack me up. They had my daughter had a test on conjunction, her conjunctions, and I was like, about fanboys, right? And she was like, everybody knows that. And I was like, okay, I just want to make sure. And she's like, everybody knows that. And I'm like, if you know it, then tell me. For and nor but or yet so. And I was like, okay, you do really know it. So over it. Like, Mom, everybody knows that. Do your kids ever do that? Ugh. Well, thank you. I mean, like I said, and I used to love teaching it, and my biggest challenge would be students going, I'm going to hate this class, I hate this, I hate you, I hate writing, I don't want to do this, I don't want to be here. And then at the end of the class, they'd be like, that was actually a really great class. Like, I learned a lot, and I learned how to enjoy writing, and I'm like, yes. Like, it was such a challenge to take people who'd be like, I hate this, and make you love it. Because I think it's fun. So let me see what your comments are saying. Tanya said, writing used to be effortless for me until a college professor told me my writing wasn't very good. Yeah, you know what? And honestly, people shouldn't do that to you. Everybody's a good writer. Not everybody's a good technical writer, but you can learn the technical stuff. But people have different styles of writing. I mean, if we look at like Kurt Vonnegut, and we look at some like writers who kind of write in different tones and styles, and I mean, who's to say? Like, would we consider Shakespeare a good writer today? You know what I mean? Like, Some people whose language is too metaphorical or too poetic, we tend to think of them as like not being good writers. You have to be careful not to put people in boxes, and especially not to like be too openly critical of people's writing. I also think, and again, you can debate me on this, I think writing needs to be personal. I've talked to so many adults over the years who, and I even try to be mindful of this with my kids. I mean, I do have to kind of monitor, it's a fine line, because I got to kind of monitor the social media, you know what I mean? And because as a good parent in this day and age, like you kind of have to know high level what's going on. So I do have to look at things every once in a while, but I really try to leave a lot of stuff private because I feel like writing is so intimate and personal. Like I don't want to open someone's personal diary and read it. I really wouldn't want someone doing that to me. And so I think there's a certain amount of like, and when that happens to us, we tend to shut down that part of our throat chakra. And then we're like, we don't want to write anymore because somebody did that. So I think it's really important to like let people have a little bit of intimate space, especially on the written page, even if it's your kids, where it's just like that's their outlet and it's not going to be judged, because I think it's really important. But it's a fine line, you know what I mean? Oh, thank you, Vanya. Is the cork supposed to fit in the ink holder? I think it is. I think it goes in the big hole. Am I supposed to be doing that? Always ask afterward. I don't want to chew on it too much. I think it's supposed to go in the big hole, but sometimes I'm not good at fitting things into their holes. I don't know. The good thing is if I spill this all over my hair, you won't know it. I've really started dyeing my hair this color. Athena said, I prefer writing over speaking. My mouth can't keep up with my brain. Yeah, it's interesting. Me too, sometimes. I also just don't know when to shut up sometimes, and so writing kind of forces me sometimes just to stop. Whereas if I'm talking, it's just like blah, 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 blah. You want to write a memoir? Well, I will tell you, we're kind of doing that. I can't give you too much of the details yet. The details about classes are coming. I think it's next week. It's not really a memoir. It's a legacy project. So fucking cool. I wish I could show you. I used to do a lot more like, I mean, it's boring in a way, but I try to follow more of the rules now at SG. I used to do more of like, ooh, oops, I showed you something I shouldn't have shown you, and then that was really fun. I'm so much better behaved now, and honestly, it's not as much fun. But when you see it, you'll know what I'm talking about. Happy early Turkey Day to you too. And it's not even early for some of you. It's already Thanksgiving where some of you are. So, and I do always have to say, I know Thanksgiving has a really screwed up history, and so I celebrate it as a day to get my family together when people don't have to work and have a beautiful meal together and talk about why we're so grateful for each other. Okay. Your college English teacher was a dick. Yeah, they can be real dicks. And honestly, one bad English teacher is all it takes to kind of ruin the whole thing, the whole kit and caboodle. You know what I mean? One of my kids had a not great English teacher, and it was like, and then went on to have a great one. And God, it's amazing what a difference a teacher can make. You know, a teacher can open up your, like my geometry teacher in college rocked my world. I could not wait to get to that class. I didn't want it to end. I would actually look at the clock and go, we only have 5 minutes left. Like I felt like I just wanted to be. She was cute. You know what I mean? And it's not that matters, but she like just showed up, and she always had like a cute outfit on, and she was so smart, and she would just make it so interesting and bring it to life, and she was funny and snappy, and I could always smell her. Like she wore the same perfume. I can't remember what it was, but it was like, I think it was like Elizabeth Arden's Red Door or something. And it's just like I could smell her, and I was obsessed with her kind of. I told her after the semester was over too, I'm like, you changed my whole life. You made me love math. Can you teach calculus too? And she's like, I like to do geometry. It's the only one I like. And I was just like, God, what a divine goddess that woman was. So, anyway. Yeah. Oh, good night, Chris Gunn. Yeah. I know it doesn't make it easy. But yeah, we will be incorporating writing and especially handwriting into next year's class. So, I'm glad. Well, tonight was kind of a classy class, like a class. Kaz said when I saw the SG Crystal Oracle reading on YouTube this morning, I got super excited thinking you'd used a Crystalpedia Oracle to go with your book. We may do that at some point. Nobody wants to make Oracle decks anymore. Publishers don't want to do it. It's so weird. I'm not kidding. So, I don't know. You spilled a lot of the ink pouring into the bottle. It's okay. I mean, honestly, it takes so little ink, as you saw. And were you surprised by how far the ink goes? It always surprises me. Like, we think about our ancestors sitting with glass pens and feeling sorry for them, like, oh my god, like they must have had to keep dipping and dipping. And it's like, actually, no, kind of a little bit goes a long way. And I love a fine tip. I'm like obsessed with fine tip pens. I don't like big, thick, chunky, like 1mm pens. I'm a 0.5 girl. I know that's such a dorky thing to say, but I really like, God, give me a 0.5mm pen. If it's edgy and it kind of makes the paper crackle, it's like sexy. If it's like a big, thick 1mm, I'm like, automatic writing question, not intentionally, but when I'm trying to fall asleep, I get messages and have to write them down. I sleep with a notebook now. I do that too. I have a little notepad, no lights on, just writing. It's a form of automatic writing. Remember that super juicy place between when you're awake and asleep is theta. You know that place? Sometimes I try to stretch that place out as long as I can because it's just so good. I had a really amazing dream last night. I have not slept well for a while, and last night I slept and I didn't do anything differently. I wish I could say I did, but I slept really well and I had an amazing dream and I didn't want to wake up from the dream, and I was able to wake up slowly from the dream, so I was like kind of still in it but not quite in it. And Pax was asleep, like cause sometimes Pax wakes me up at like 6 in the morning. He was like snoring and sleeping in, and it, like the sun was coming through, and it was just like, oh, this is such a like a good juicy honey place to be, you know. And that's great. I mean, if you have a pen and you can just not get yourself, not wake up, you know, but just stay in that kind of slow, sexy place, that's a good place to be. We're not raising prices on classes next year. So if that's what your budget needs to know. This is the 3rd year in a row we're not raising prices. I won't be able to do that after this year though, because our prices go up, and I keep trying because the economy sucks so bad to like not raise prices on you, because I don't want people to say I can't do it because you raised the prices. But, so this will be the last year I can say I'm not raising prices, but I'm not raising prices. Yay! And wait till you see what you get if you sign up before the end of the year. This is where I would normally go rogue and show you. I don't have it to show you. Yeah, even 0.7 is too much. I want a 0.5. What is in the pen? It's just glass. Oh, it's like a dichroic glass. Is that what you mean, Pam? Yeah. I don't normally get that. I normally have like a rude awakening, like, oh, out of bed, get kids to school, like my daughter has 0 period, or normally, oh, Paxton's parking because he has to poop or whatever. So I don't normally get those like really syrupy mornings, but I got one this morning. It was just like, thank you for that, you know? What I'm hearing about the Oracle card thing is that there's too many decks out there, and I'm always like, I can make a different one. I mean, too many decks? That's like saying there's too many books. It's like saying there's too many eyeshadows. I mean, what the fuck is wrong with people? I can't. Athena's like, you're being so naughty. If I was really naughty, Athena, I would show them the damn thing, and I'm not going to, because I don't have it. I'll wait till you see. Yes, you will be getting info on next year's classes, I think, next week. I think I'm being remarkably good, if I do say so myself. Okay. Do you have any other questions? Oh, the UFO story. Do you want to hear the UFO story? Do you want me to take your time with that? Some of you have heard it. Next year's classes, though, are really, what I can tell you is, I birthed it. Remember when I went to Mexico? I had an idea, but I mean, it completely crystallized in Mexico and down there in the Yucatan jungle. And I came home and just laid it all out. My team would tell you, I was like, and of course got their input and made tweaks and tunes to it, but it was just like, this is what we're doing. And it's not anything we've done before. And it is going to culminate in a legacy project that I think you're going to really feel proud to leave to your future ancestors, which to me is a big deal. Think about your collection of things that you have in your life, right? And how many of those, even for me, because I've got a nice collection of stuff, right? How many of those are actually going to be things that my grandchildren or, whatever, because I have lots of people's kids that I love, like my own, that they would really, really want, and this is going to be one of those things that you're going to be like, who am I going to leave this to? This is a big deal. Started card publishing business in LA. That sounds like a lot of work. Why don't you do it? And then publish my decks. When you guys have suggestions, I'm like, such a good idea. Can you do it? I don't want to do that. So I'll give you the long story short. My grandmother used to come over a lot, and my mom and my grandma were both had really bad insomnia. And I loved it because, I always tell you, like, they always left the lights on. Even to this day, I like to sleep with the light on because I could always tell my mom was still awake because the light would be on in the living room. Or she would leave the TV on and fall asleep. So they were awake really late one night, and they both smoked. So they would go on the patio, outside on the patio where my dad still lives, and smoke. And even to this day, my parents' house, there's an empty lot next to it. So they were out there smoking on the patio and looked over, and I swear it was just like me looking into the parking lot here. And there was a UFO. And it looked like, they drew it a bunch of times. Silver, rainbow lights, beam of light coming down, and then there were little creatures in here, and moving back and forth. It was all silver like chrome, and about like the size of like half a football field. And they said they both looked over and then like looked back and then looked over again, and were like, what are you gonna say? Right? The thing is as big as their house, right? And it was making no sound. There was no sound. And the lights were showing down on the field, okay? There was no noise. It was silent. Silent. It landed. It wasn't there when they went out there. It landed, silent. Rainbow lights, beings moving back and forth. They could see the outline, like eyes and all the things. It was that close. What model year was it? This was, my grandma died 1999, so this was a while ago. My mom had a kind of a weird abduction situation when she was little. This was not that. They were not taken on board. They just saw it. And so they both looked at each other and looked back and looked back and looked back, and they both said they kind of just didn't feel like they could move, because it was like, what if they moved and then they got noticed? You know what I mean? Like, what do you do when that happens? And they both said they thought they were out there for like a few minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes or something. They didn't know how long it was. And I think they said they went out there at like 1 a.m. And then the thing up and went out over the Pacific Ocean, no sound. And it was instant, just up and gone. Like they talk about, right? Because it's a technology that we don't have, right? Like planes can't do that, where they're just in 2 seconds they're gone and there's no sound. And And so they both went inside, and it had been like 2 or 3 hours. They lost time. So that's another like thing that happens with these kinds of experiences. They went inside, and it was like they both told, like, we swear it was like 1 a.m. when we went out there to smoke, and when we came in it was like 3 or 3:30, something like that. And my mom always saw white owls, which are not native to where we live, before she would have these like experiences. I haven't seen one. We have barn owls and other owls in our neighborhood, but not white owls. But that's common to these experiences too. So I remember the next day them talking about it, and my grandmother was like really shaken. And my mom was the kind of person who would like talk about it, and she was drawing it and describing it and all this stuff, and my dad was like, but even my dad, even to this day, he's like, you know, your grandmother, he's like, that was the hard part for me, is it's like my grandmother was like, this just does not jive with my faith. So I remember her telling me, I will tell you about it. You can ask me one more time, and then I don't want to talk about this again. And we really didn't until she died. Crazy, right? So now they're both where they are, partying on with all the cool kids. That happened to them. So that's why I'm like, I've had all these experiences where I'm like, people can say, oh, UFOs aren't real, or like I've had a very real experience with Jesus. Like, people can choose not to believe what they don't want to believe, but because I've had all these experiences, it's like I have to believe it, but I don't tell other people they have to believe it. Like, if you don't want to believe in UFOs and Jesus and all that stuff, like, do you? It's totally fine. We can still be friends. I've had intense family and personal experiences. So, okay, I do have 2 things. Was it only 2 things to tell you about? 3 things to tell you about today. 4 things, okay? On sagegoddess.com, the code is BLACK for 27% off. We did a kind of an extra special, bigger code for right now, so if you haven't shopped, there's 2 reasons why it might be good to shop today. These are both before midnight. If you saw my live on Facebook, I am giving away this ring, which is Moldavite. Let me show you on the product camera. Moldavite with, isn't that beautiful? With pink tourmaline. And it's got stars on the side. It's like a rubellite tourmaline, and it's adjustable. So if you make one purchase at sagegoddess.com, you can go and enter to win that ring. And then, Karen, what's the rules for this other one? So I decided to do a special enter to win just for folks in our programs. I thought this was really special. If you remember, I made this during COVID. Do you remember? I did. I made it. There was a session where I did it live, and we don't even have these aura points anymore. It's glued. But it really holds the time, and the letters are all raised, and it says, bless the intention of this grid with gratitude, love, joy, healing, prosperity, and positive energy. And it's a flower of life, and it has all the chakra stones. And so I'm giving this away to one of you. And so one purchase enters you to win both. Karen says you have to put the word muse in your notes to win the grid. Can we run this through? Shouldn't we run it through tomorrow, though? Because if they have to use a word, maybe we should give them 24 more hours, because some people won't see this before. Can we run it through Thanksgiving at midnight? It has a lot of sentimental value. So if you shop and you comment on the live, you'll enter to win the Moldavite ring. Your code is BLACK. Now there's 2 things I think you should shop for, and then I'm going to let you go. 2 new things today. And I don't know if you saw them. I showed them earlier, but you may have missed my live. We have the most beautiful citrine clusters from Madagascar. They are, or is it Morocco? I think they're Moroccan. In my life, I've never seen natural citrine clusters like this before, and they're under $20. So for your crystal healing collection, like your crystal healing tray, I would get one of those. and they are natural. I think they're beautiful. It almost makes Congo citrine look not fancy. But the main thing, and I don't know if there's any of them left, did you see the Vogel? The main thing you need to know is the feminine end has aquamarine in sterling silver and the masculine end has carnelian in sterling silver. Is that the most beautiful? And it's gorgeous and it's affordable, but we only have 4 dozen of them, so I don't know how many of these are left. But if you missed the Vogel from today, I would go get a Vogel. I just don't know if there's any left. I didn't check before I went live, but it's one of my favorite things that we've made for you. So those are the 2 things I wanted to show you. 2 things that I think you should get if you're shopping for gifts for yourself or someone else. I mean, it's really cool to give someone a beautiful citrine for the holidays. If you're looking for like a $20 gift, you know, sometimes you are like, I want to get them a gift, but I don't want to break the bank. Like, what can I give for 20 bucks? It's really actually very special. And you can write them a note. I mean, they're fully terminated. There's 1,000 points on these. It's like little spirit cords, but they're citrine. And then write them a note with a wish for their abundance for the new year. It's a great, very thoughtful, intentional gift. Oh, the Vogels are still available, so. Okay, that's all I got for you tonight. Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours. I want to say that I'm thankful for you, and because I really, truly am. Thankful for Karen, thankful for Team SG, thankful for all of you for being here. This year's class has been really fun to teach. You know, every year has been an adventure, and this year in particular, there have been so many things that I've really enjoyed about it. I've enjoyed this section because, or this session, this practicing magic session, because it's been kind of practical, and there's a little bit of that practicality woven into next year too. There's more art woven into next year. So if you've loved that too, that thread will continue. But there's been so many highlights this year of time with you, bringing you into my kitchen, which that's going to continue to next year. So thank you for being here and going for the ride and trusting me to bring you, you know, what I know and love and letting me share with you. It's just, I'm a very lucky, blessed human, and sometimes it's nice just to stop and say, I'm grateful. Really, truly grateful for you. You make my world a better, more beautiful place to be. And we here at Sage Goddess try to do the same thing for you. So enjoy. I'm going to be cooking my little heart out tomorrow, and if you are too, I'll be thinking about you. And even if you're not cooking your little heart out tomorrow, I have a lot of like, my dad now is on a low sodium diet, so I can't do the usual. I was going to do this like fetid chicken bake, and I can't do that because he can't have all the sodium anymore. Your name's fun. Giving him a hard time about it. But anyway, Diet Dr. Pepper, cheers to you. Have a beautiful Thanksgiving. And we'll see you soon.